When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
The Sephora Savings Event is here.
World in my hand, I'll take this and that.
And that. Ooh, and this. Oh, it's true. Find everything you want on sale at the Sephora Savings Event. It only happens twice a year, and it's on now through November 11th. Find brands like Rare Beauty, Glow Recipe, Valentino, K18, and more, all for less. Shop at Sephora and Sephora at Kohl's today. Limitations apply. Must be a beauty insider. See terms at Sephora.com for complete details.
Hey, Disturbed listeners. We've got another podcast that we'll bet you want to hear. Dakota Spotlight isn't your average true crime podcast. Emmy Award-winning creator James Wolner delves headfirst into unsolved mysteries and forgotten cases of the upper Midwest and beyond, meticulously researching every detail to deliver a gripping, heartfelt narrative. James prioritizes ethical storytelling, ensuring the victims are treated with care and respect. This is episode 1 from season 10, exploring the unsolved murder of 18-year-old college freshman Christine Rothschild in the 1960s. The rest of season 10 is fully released, so if you like what you hear, check the podcast out at the link in the description to binge the rest of the season. And hey, thanks.
This podcast describes events that may be disturbing to some listeners, including violent assault and stalking. Please take care while listening. You're listening to Dakota Spotlight. My name is James Wolner. There are few, if any, American crimes which have captivated the same attention and imagination as the Tate LaBianca murders of 1969. And while this season is not about Charles Manson or his Manson family or the murders they committed, in order to fully digest and settle into this story, consider this. Authors, historians, and others have pinpointed those Manson crimes, that is, the murders of actor and model Sharon Tate, her unborn child, and 6 others, as a moment in U.S. history which symbolizes the abrupt end of the 1960s era of peace and love. For many Americans, the national headlines about those savage murders in Los Angeles, California on August 9 and 10, 1969 dramatically and abruptly altered their perception of the nation's counterculture. And like a landslide, it happened quickly and unexpectedly.
5 persons, including actress Sharon Tate, were found dead at the home of Miss Tate and her husband, screen director Roman Polanski. Miss Tate, who starred in Valley of the Dolls, was 8 months pregnant and was found in a bikini-type nightgown with a rope around her neck attached to the body of a man. Among the other victims were Hollywood hairstylist Jay Sebring and coffee heiress Abigail Folger.
What had once been characterized by rebellion against mainstream norms, anti-establishment sentiment, peace, love, resistance to the Vietnam War, and civil rights, the flower power community became instead associated with entirely different things: violence, murder, and evil.
One officer summed up the murders when he said, "In all my years, I have never seen anything like this before."
And all this, they say, ultimately hurled the nation towards a more suspicious and conservative outlook in the 1970s. In other words, Manson changed everything. Seen from this angle, the Manson family and Los Angeles were ground zero of this change, And the epicenter of it all was that small home tucked away in a canyon in Beverly Hills, where the beautiful Sharon Tate and the others were murdered. However, as with any major shift in a nation's trajectory, it wasn't quite that simple or sudden. Manson wasn't exactly the end of an era, more like the beginning of an end. And if the social fallout from Tate LaBianca was a landslide, well, the erosion beneath had been taking place for a long time. As I said, this story is not about Charles Manson and his so-called family, nor is it about the demise of a beautiful young Hollywood model at the end of an era. No, this story is about a much lesser-known case, a different murder of a different stunning young woman. Unlike Sharon Tate's, this woman's name never captured the national spotlight. In May of 1968, some 15 months before the Tate LaBianca murders, in a location far from the Pacific Ocean and glitz of Hollywood, an 18-year-old college freshman was brutally murdered on her campus. Her killer has never been brought to justice. Her name was Christine Rothschild, and her death took place in an epicenter all its own. Christine Rothschild was a freshman at the University of Wisconsin-Madison during the 1967-68 school year, a pivotal location and time in the United States that would unexpectedly thrust the counterculture movement into the national stage. In this series, we will delve into the murder of Christine Rothschild. We will learn about her upbringing, her short life at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and we'll explore the world she was navigating in 1967 and 1968. Through interviews I've conducted, you'll hear from those who were there at the time and from people who were not even born in 1967. You'll meet a 90-year-old investigator who questioned a most bizarre and eccentric suspect, a suspect we will be learning a lot about. You'll also meet a gutsy young punk rocker from London, that is, London, Ontario, in Canada, who decades later dared to engage that same suspect in a conversation that smacked of sheer madness. But that's not all this story is about. We will also meet an extraordinary woman named Linda, whose life's work has been dedicated to seeking justice for her college friend, Christine Rothschild. Not only did Linda make a pledge to herself to seek out the truth and get justice for Christine, like a spy or double agent, she did so in extraordinarily creative and cunning ways, spending decades infiltrating social and family circles, expertly gathering clues and intelligence, and ultimately locating, confronting, and then hounding the man she says killed her friend, Christine. And back then, Linda may not have identified with her flower power co-eds, nor taken part in demonstrations on campus, nor fully embraced the historical social movements taking place all around her. However, through incredible dedication to her murdered friend, Linda ultimately became a crusader for justice, and in seeking justice, she employed some of the very same ideals that the 1960s counterculture stood for. That is, questioning authority, insisting on institutional accountability, and acting upon her own deep-seated ethical convictions. The 60s may be an era that came to an end long ago, but its influence didn't just vanish. In some ways, it's still here and still relevant. We catch small glimpses of it all the time, in individual acts of kindness, courageous resistance to hate and to bigotry, and as you'll see, embodied in the quest of one woman to catch a killer. Welcome to Season 10, You Killed Chris, a friend's fight for justice.
Sad news for all of you, and that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
American warplanes have expanded the air war over North Vietnam with the bombing of 5 previously untouched targets near the heart of the port city of Haiphong.
Senator Kennedy has been shot. Is that possible? It's possible. He has. Not only Senator Kennedy. Oh, my God.
Law and order have broken down in Detroit, Michigan.
Largest civil rights demonstration ever in Memphis, Tennessee. That sound you just heard was the sound of a tear gas fired by a police officer.
I think the peace movement should have the anger of a Vietnamese woman whose child was burned by napalm, dropped by American planes.
A band of Viet Cong raiders blew up a power installation and attacked 2 police stations in Saigon.
For it seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate.
The university was not willing to prohibit Dow Chemical Company from coming.
Go down the hall and Christine's room was like in the middle of the hall, down that hall.
Well, needless to say, there was a lot of people with bloody heads.
I was so frightened, I'd run in, take the test, and then run out.
There's something really beautiful about how dedicated Linda has been to the memory of her friend.
I think Linda solved the case beautifully.
Let's begin with a brief overview of Christine's murder, starting with the morning she was killed, Sunday, May 26, 1968, 7 weeks after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and just 10 days before Robert Kennedy would be gunned down in cold blood. I'll enlist briefly the help of 2 people I've interviewed. We'll be hearing from them later as we look much closer at the details of this day, but for now, here is a high-level look at Christine's murder.
So it was a Sunday morning, and it was just a cloudy, kind of gloomy day around Madison.
This is Kevin Damask. Kevin wrote a book titled Cold, The Unsolved Murders of 7 Young Women. One of the chapters in his book focuses on Christine Rothschild's murder.
Pretty much overcast, drizzly day, a cool day for late May. It was, towards the end of May.
And this is Sarah Surratt, who was a sophomore at the university that year.
And I used to see her all the time, and I can remember admiring her and thinking how beautiful she was.
Sarah lived in the same residence hall as Christine Rothschild, a private dorm named Anne Emery Hall.
I lived on the same floor as Christine. She lived a few doors down from me. She was tall and thin and had long, straight blonde hair, and she looked like one of those teen models. And apparently she was in high school. She did model.
On the morning she was murdered, Christine woke up at 4 a.m. in her private dorm room. She walked to the communal bathrooms, showered, and then prepared for her morning walk.
She was always up really early walking, and I remember some girls talking about the fact that she took these walks because she had so much pain in her stomach, with her gut, because she had colitis. I remember people talking about that.
Author Kevin Damask again.
Even though it was a Sunday morning when a lot of college kids would stay in, she got up early and did her usual routine, just got up in a residence hall.
Only one person saw Christine before she left Anne Emery Hall that morning. Christine was walking in the hallway on her way to the showers when a house mother or night hostess named Gertrude Armstrong passed her. Like on any other morning, the two exchanged a quick hello.
Nothing really seemed out of the ordinary when she got up, just went about her day and went on her walk.
Christine then left the dorm building, walking out into the twilight of morning. She was bundled up in her twill coat and black knee-high boots. She had gloves with her and carried a black umbrella. Stuffed in her pocket were her cigarettes, a lighter, a room key, and money for coffee. Her body was found in the late afternoon by a 23-year-old maintenance worker named Philip, who had arrived at a building named Sterling Hall, located directly across the street from the hospital. The entrance to the large brick building was at the top of a stone or concrete stairway.
He was going to just go right into the building while the doors were locked, Sunday night. And so in order to get his friend's attention, he's like, well, I'll just go by this window here that's by this thicket of bushes and pound on the window. My buddy will see me. I say, hey, go to the front door, let me in.
So Philip walked into the bushes on the right side of the stairs and headed towards the basement window. It was then and there that he discovered the body of Christine Rothschild. Christine had been stabbed 14 times.
Very gruesome, and they believe that she was also partially strangled too with the lining of her coat that basically was ripped out during the attack and had strangled her. And they stuffed her gloves down her throat. Through the autopsy, it found out that she had taken a direct blow to the face.
In fact, both of her jaws were broken. The autopsy also showed that Christine had not been sexually assaulted. What seemed less certain was exactly when or where she died.
I always kind of wondered if she was trying to escape her killer and trying to get into the building maybe, and why she was, or maybe the killer had kind of moved her body and was placed it there. It's a speculation too on when exactly she was murdered, because it could have happened earlier in the morning when it was still kind of dark out. Maybe people didn't see as much as far as witnesses. But then there's some speculation that it was maybe later in the morning, maybe like 9 or 10 o'clock.
The police found Christine's umbrella next to her body and also another curious item. It has been described as an expensive men's handkerchief. The handkerchief had been neatly folded and laid out on the ledge of a basement window. Christine's head was resting on top of the handkerchief. It seemed that she had been placed in that position.
Initially, there was, I think, a lot of people that the local police speculated on, a lot of students that they interviewed.
Here is Sarah Sorrelt again.
The police questioned everybody at the dorm. And I remember we were at the dorm when they questioned us. We went in a room off of the lobby, I believe, one at a time. And they asked us questions like if she was dating anybody, if we knew who she was dating. And honestly, I didn't know anything about that.
This strange-looking creature gave Wisconsin its nickname, the Badger State. And this badger resides at the Milwaukee Zoo, but his kinfolk may be found in forests such as this. 50% of Wisconsin is natural woodland, making it ideal vacation country for anyone who loves the out-of-doors. But the woods and lakes are only part of the story of this beautiful state. In the city of Racine...
Before we transport ourselves back in time to explore Christine Rothschild's life and death, before we meet her amazing friend Linda and others who were there at the time, let's get a quick understanding of the location where this all took place, in south central Wisconsin on the campus of the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
The state capital is Madison, a beautiful small city with Lake Mendota on the north and Lake Monona to the south. Milwaukee, however, is Wisconsin's major city with a population of over 6...
If you're not quite sure where the city of Madison lies, imagine this. You're sitting in your parked car at the state capitol building in the center of Madison, and you're itching to take a road trip. Well, you have some options. Perhaps you'd like to drive 2.5 hours southeast to the big city of Chicago, 150 miles away. Looking for a longer drive? Why not cruise 270 miles in the opposite direction northwest to Minneapolis, Minnesota? Looking for a shorter day trip? Just 80 miles due east of Madison is the big city of Milwaukee on the shores of that gigantic body of water, Lake Michigan. But if it's a lake you're looking for, you don't need to start your car at all. Just a 10-minute stroll away from the Capitol, there are 2 lakes to discover, each in a different direction. The Capitol building and the nearby university campus are both centered on an isthmus, a narrow strip of land between water, with Lake Mendota to the north and Lake Monona to the south. At its most narrow point, this strip of land between the waters measures just 0.7 miles or 1 kilometer across. But if a lake isn't what you're looking for, perhaps you'd like to take a different 10-minute walk and head west to explore the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which, by the way, is commonly referred to as the UW. To get to the UW, you will do what people there have done for over 150 years. You'll walk east on State Street. Along State Street, you are first met with the sights, sounds, and aromas of a vibrant social scene. Restaurants, bars, boutiques, and coffee shops, all bustling with students, faculty, and state employees and visitors. Once beyond this bubbly pocket of activity, you're approaching the campus, true Christine Rothschild country, her old stomping grounds back in 1967 and 1968. First, on your right, is Memorial Library and the Outdoor Library Mall. As you'll soon hear, Christine spent a lot of time in that library. In fact, it was here, in this library, that Christine first began to feel increasingly concerned about a somewhat bothersome and persistent older man. You continue on your walk when State Street suddenly just ends at the bottom of a historic quad named Bascom Hill. As you stroll up the modest incline of Bascom Hill, you'll marvel at the mature trees and the green lawns crisscrossed with walking paths, bustling with students moving between classes. It was here, somewhere, in the days leading up to her murder, that Christine Rothschild stopped to speak with 2 university police officers. Perched at the top of Bascom Hill is one of the university's oldest and most iconic buildings, Bascom Hall. With 6 white columns, tall windows, and a grand entrance, Bascom Hall stands there somewhat majestically, a statue of Abraham Lincoln sitting before it. You are now at the heart of the campus, a historical spot rich in tradition. The mascot of UW is a badger, and the school's primary colors are red and white. Red color is called Badger Red. The school's fight song is called On Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin, run right through that line. Run the ball clear round Chicago, touchdown sure this time. You rock, rock. On Wisconsin, fight on for her fame. Fight, fellows, fight, fight, fight. We'll win this game.
You continue on now past the north side of Bascom Hall and walk Observatory Drive, where you discover what was Christine Rothschild's favorite spot on campus, the iconic 85-foot-tall Carillon Bell Tower. To circle back to your car, you head northeast along the northern flank of the campus. There you discover another bustling meeting place, the century-old Memorial Union, with its view of Lake Mendota and the opposing shore some 4 miles away. On another bustling sidewalk along Langdon Street, you pass the library again, and then suddenly you find yourself standing and looking up at a European-looking 5-story brick building. The address is 265 Langdon Street. Today it is an apartment building, but when Christine Rothschild lived here, it was a private dorm residence named Anne Emery Hall. Anne Emery was opened in 1930 and quickly became one of the largest and most popular independent private women's dorms on campus. With its ivy-covered brick walls and elaborate stone carvings of knights and rosettes decorating the vaulted wooden doorway, Christine Rothschild's last home feels more European and medieval than 20th century American. Christine first arrived at this spot in September of 1967. She left it for the last time on the early morning of May 26, 1968. During the short 8 months that she was here, it's hard to know exactly how she felt and exactly what she thought as she slept in Anne Emery or while roaming the UW campus. But thankfully, we do know quite a lot. We know what Christine shared with her friend, Linda Schulko. In fact, if it wasn't for Linda, this story would have likely gone lost and mostly forgotten forever. So let's go back to the fall of 1967, when Linda and Christine were freshmen at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. It was here that Linda first met Christine, or Chris, as she was called.
The story at Wisconsin starts with new students who come to the campus in the fall. Some from the farm, some from small Wisconsin towns, leaving home for the first time. Some from large cities. Some are freshmen, some graduate students.
I started college in the fall semester of 1967, and UW-Madison had always been my goal because during high school I had attended a new library, a student library association organization there, and I had spent a week there on campus during my senior year.
Different ages, different background. Each year a new community is formed, a brand new little city. Students need a place to live and to eat. They wonder who their friends will be. Everything is strange.
I came from a small Catholic girls' academy, which was very conservative, And when I arrived in Madison, it was just actually the antithesis of anything I'd ever seen or known in life. I was totally inappropriate dressed because I had matching outfits and everything. And consequently, I stood out very sorely from the very first moment I arrived and was aware of it. I lived on the second floor of Whitty Hall on Johnson Street. And the dorm had 1,000 females in the dorm, which was huge to me, having come from a school of 800. I really did not make friends quickly there. I was just very solitary, and I would eat my meals alone. I think that I spent most of my days just walking around the campus, just trying to acclimate myself to where I was so I wouldn't get lost, because I had only been on the campus one time prior to that. Between the campus to the Capitol, it seemed like there were a million bars, one small bar after another. It stunk. It smelled like, beer. And it's as if everybody was there. And it just seemed so abnormal to me because that atmosphere was so different for me. I was just astounded by the noise and the activities going on at the library mall area and the shops and everything. It was just totally inconceivable to me that people lived this free. It was all very astounding to me.
Linda was not in any way alone in her astonishment of what was going on around her. Coming into that fall semester, the whole nation had witnessed a summer like no other. The summer of 1967 is known by two different names, the Summer of Love and the Long, Hot Summer of 1967. Two names representing two drastically different aspects of American society and cultural dynamics at the time. The Summer of Love was a West Coast term where in San Francisco, thousands of young people joined the hippie movement for a cultural revolution of peace, love, freedom, and experimentation. The Summer of Love was psychedelics and communal living in opposition to the Vietnam War. The Summer of Love was Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix. The other name for this summer, the Long, Hot Summer of 1967, was about something different. Intense civil unrest, racial tensions, and violence, mostly affecting African American communities. There were over 150 riots that summer in response to systematic inequalities, discrimination, poverty, high unemployment, and police brutality. At least 85 people died, more than 2,000 were injured, and about 11,000 people were arrested. What Linda was witnessing on the UW campus and along State Street during that first week of college smacked of the Summer of Love, free-spirited stuff, the counterculture. But the other side of that summer, the long, hot summer of 1967, that was not far away. Back in June of 67, there were riots in Atlanta, Boston, Cincinnati, and Tampa. In July, riots in Birmingham, Chicago, Detroit, Minneapolis, Newark, New Britain, New York City, Plainsfield, Rochester, Toledo, and also just down the road from Madison in Milwaukee. The most destructive riots were in Newark, New Jersey, and in Detroit, Michigan, where 43 people lost their lives.
American warplanes have expanded the air war over North Vietnam with the bombing of 5 previously untouched targets near the heart of the port city of Haiphong. U.S. bombers also zeroed in on a radar site near the Kien An MiG base, 8 miles south of the port city.
We're fighting one war now in Vietnam, and we're losing, as it is. So, why should we come back here and fight a war among ourselves?
Law and order have broken down in Detroit, Michigan. Pillage, looting, murder, and arson have nothing to do with civil rights.
In Hot Springs, Arkansas, a critic of the administration's Vietnam policies, J. William Fulbright, hurled a charge at Secretary of State Dean Rusk. The Arkansas Democrat accused Rusk of carrying on a McCarthy-type crusade against people opposing the Vietnam War.
Lyndon Johnson! Lyndon Johnson! Working. Who is he working for? He's not working for the people of this country. Lyndon Johnson is working for big business. U.S. big business. That's... Keep moving.
The new 1967 Dodge Coronet. Everything you want in 67 is right here. It's under here, where you can get up to 383 cubic inches of muscle. Out here, where the beauty is something you can't escape. It's in here, where the room and luxury leave other cars taking a backseat. New Dodge Coronet, the low-priced getaway car of 1967.
I introduced myself to the libraries, of course, because I felt a responsibility to stick with my academic. That's the only reason that I was allowed to go to college, is to get my degree, nothing else. I liked Madison, and I knew that it was a great educational place, and I was anxious for classes to start. But my initial impression of the campus was like, I don't think I'm going to have a lot of interaction with a great part of what goes on here.
Confusion, anticipation, excitement. They're all a part of the life of a beginning student at the University of Wisconsin. At the annual New Student Picnic, held on the western edge of the campus, food for the body is just as important as the food for thought that will be a continuing source of intellectual nourishment for these students during their stay at the university. Getting acquainted and just plain knowing where to go is essential to getting off on the right foot. Because once the school year is underway, there are precious few chances for a breather. The pace is fast and demanding.
About a week and a half before classes began, the Letters in Science Honors Program made appointments for everyone to come and speak with Dean Rudicelli privately to work out our courses for the first semester. He had a very small office on the first floor of South Hall, which was right next to Bascom Hall, which was the main building on the hill of UW. And we were sitting in there, and everybody was trying to look quiet, sophisticated, and private. And that's how I met Chris. She was wearing like a blue shift with white tights and white shoes, loafers, dressed too well for all of us. but she had no arrogance or presence to her as far as like, well, we're in a different class here or something. One of the guys knocked over a huge rack of brochures, and I mean, it just, in this tiny room, it was everywhere. And right away, Chris got up. There were about 9 of us, 10 of us in the room perhaps, and Chris got up right away and was on her hands and knees picking things up. And what I noticed about her right away is the guy was really embarrassed, and she whispered something in his ear. And he smiled, and then he kept on picking up the things on the floor with the rest of us and sat back down. But I was always kind of like, I wonder what she said to him, because he seemed so calm and relaxed afterwards. So when we got done picking up all this stuff that was accumulated on the floor, I took the seat right next to her. And we sat there for a few minutes, and I finally said what my name was, and she introduced herself. And it was kind of a short conversation, and she said she was from Chicago. And I asked her where she lived, and she told me, and we exchanged that kind of information. And that was really about it at that moment. I didn't see her again until maybe 3 or 4 days later, when I was passing the Carillon Tower, which was the side of Bascom Hill by the Commerce Building, and she was sitting there just having a cigarette, and I sat down and spoke with her then, and that's when we really started talking more. After that, we just became friends. was probably the opposite of me when I met her. She was very well dressed. I remember that very vividly. It took a while for me to feel comfortable with the fact that attire-wise, she was smoking and so forth, which I had never done in my life. It was just so different for me, and so I was so unaccustomed to being around people like this that I was a little hesitant at first to even befriend her. But after a few times of meeting her randomly on the hill and so forth, that'll disappear, of course.
Christine Rothschild grew up in North Chicago. She was the second oldest of 4 children, all girls. The family lived in a prosperous community named Edgewater in a plush 2-story, 15-room home. Her father was an inventor and successful businessman. His daughters never needed to apply for scholarships or be too concerned about money. His daughters grew up in an environment intended to stimulate learning and creativity, surrounded by books, music, and art. Christine and her sisters were well-groomed and well-coached in a home where appearances mattered. Christine attended a huge high school in Chicago named Nicholas Senn High School. Christine excelled at Senn High, ranking 4th in a class of 500. She was also a teen model around Chicago and her older sister a clothing designer. Christine had aspirations of becoming a journalist, and from what Linda recalls about her personality, she probably would have made a really great one.
She was very quiet, more the listener than the talker, but she was always listening. It's not like she was tuned out or, her mind was in a different direction. She was just very tuned into when people talk. And when you would be talking, like if I'd be talking or complaining or whatever about class or anything, whatever, she would think before she would open her mouth and say something. She would go, well, how did that happen? Or she'd try to get the whole perspective on the situation. She was very pensive in a way about things. She didn't just blurt things out like I did. I also found that she was not real animated. She would sit quietly and compose, whereas, I would get louder perhaps, or I'd start gesturing or whatever, and she would just be watching, and sometimes she'd say, you seem a bit agitated there, Linda, that kind of thing. And it would be like I would start laughing, and so would she, but she didn't gesture a lot, and I would say that she more or less was introspective on things as far as she would like analyze things and get things into perspective in her mind before she'd open her mouth or comment or say anything. And when she would complain, she didn't go on and on like I would. She would be very succinct. And if you weren't really tuned into Chris, you could sometimes not catch that she was really upset or happy or whatever about something because it wasn't expressed in a long, drawn-out conversation. She was just a kind of a controlled personality.
Go, go, go with Spinner Top! Spinner Top here! Spinner Top there! Spinner Top everywhere! It's the thing to wear! Keeps your brain warm, gives your ears the air, and when you go, 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 it's more fun than hair! Everything's more fun with Spinner Top! Spinner Top here! Spinner Top there! Spinner Top everywhere! It's the thing to wear, keeps your brain warm, gives your ears the air, and when you go, 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 it's more fun than...
She was a huge coffee drinker, and she always was smoking. She smoked something I had never heard of, which were lettuce cigarettes. And I think that might be one of the reasons why, even though she was a big smoker, she never had that, what I call the smoker stench to her. Smoked lettuce cigarettes, which was strange to me, and she explained that she had to buy them in particular stores because they weren't that widespread. We used to meet in between classes because she loved to have a cigarette break with coffee, and I didn't drink coffee. I'd always have a shake, a sundae, a burger, chips, whatever. And we would meet then or after classes before dinner. We would meet for an hour or so and sit by the Carillon Tower or go into one of the study areas in the hallway in one of the in one of the buildings, especially Van Heist, because we both took language there. We just started spending more and more time, and then she would come visit at the dorm. We studied so many hours per day, and we were in classes so many hours. We had an overload, both of us, that there was very little recreational time. We just didn't have the social time that most people had, even on weekends.
As the fall semester of 1967 moved along for Linda and Christine, the nation's counterculture vicariously experienced a setback when the much idolized revolutionary leader Che Guevara was killed. His death became a symbol for the ultimate sacrifice for revolutionary ideals. And not far from Madison, in Milwaukee, it wasn't a hippie or a Marxist guerrilla at the forefront of demonstrations and protests, but actually a Catholic priest, Father James Groppe, who led marches for equal rights and equal housing.
The controversy continues. Is the revolutionary leader, Ernesto Che Guevara, really dead? The Bolivian army says yes, and that his body has been cremated. But Guevara's brother, Roberto, has just returned from Bolivia, and he says the guerrilla killed by the Bolivian army was not his brother.
We are very concerned about the attitude and the conduct of the mayor of the city of Milwaukee. Everyone built him up as such a great hero when there was this little disturbance on 3rd Street because he called in the National Guard immediately and put the entire city under a curfew. Well, for heaven's sake, we have a right to exercise our constitutional God-given right of free speech. Now, for heaven's sake, he had a white riot on the South Side for the last 2 nights, and what did he call for? A voluntary curfew. He didn't have any voluntary curfew when a few blacks tore up part of 3rd Street. Father, that's what we can. That's a double standard of justice.
Well, Father, has your marches to the South Side accomplished anything so far for fair housing?
We're going to get fair housing, not only for the city of Milwaukee, but we're going to get it on a national scene. And it's going to be this consistent type of courageous protest that's going to bring about fair housing legislation. Frederick Douglass talked about this 100 years ago. He said, no one ever got their rights given to them on a platter. You've got to fight for it, you've got to struggle for it, and that's what we're doing. We're protesting.
Hi-ho, hey, hey, to Wrigley's Spearmint Gum. Work goes faster, smoother too. Life seems brighter when you chew. Hi-ho, hey, hey, to Wrigley's Spearmint Gum.
She was a very private person. I knew nothing about, we never talked about high school. She went to Senn High School, which was a huge high school. She was like all-class president one time and vice president of her class at another time. And she was very active in the newspaper and also in like student aid assistance for helping students study and so forth. But she never talked about any of this. She never said how her class rank was even like 4 out of 500, which to me was something that I think I would have made it known more often than never, you know, in the right circumstances. But none of this would ever be disclosed because she never really focused on herself as far as saying, well, you did this, but in my class we did that, or man, yours was small, but mine was huge, or, you know, nothing. And she never talked very much. Like I'd ask her if she ever went to prom and that, because I never did. She never mentioned like prom or big occasions or things that she attended or participated in that were very important to the campus and to the legend of people really knowing her. I always wanted to go, like there was Paisano's Pizza Parlor there on State Street and over on University. And she would always be glad to come along. That was never an issue, but she never ate. At first I thought, well, maybe she's just being super polite and maybe my taste in food is not the same as hers or whatever. But then I realized very quickly she had an eating disorder. I didn't have a name for it or anything at that point, but I could see that while I'm stuffing my face with pizza or a hot dog over at, one of the places or a bratwurst, she would be having a cup of coffee.
shakes. So if you want your own soda fountain now, go to the store and get Great Shakes. What's the name of it? Great Shakes. Great Shakes.
Still yet to come on future episodes of You Killed Chris, One Friend's Fight for Justice.
I remember her telling me one day, she said, this oddball old man, really obnoxious, she says.
Why did I even hire this idiot?
Sometimes everything isn't okay.
The very next morning, he called the police department and said, could this be him?
He lied about his family. He lied about his role in the World War.
With a gun, and kept on pulling the trigger and the bolt back and forth.
Pretty sure I interviewed a serial killer today. And
she says he's like a few rows away from me, and he always seems to be facing me.
Dakota Spotlight is written and produced by me, James Wallner, and is a proud member of the Porchlight Podcast Network. A huge thank you goes out to Linda Shulko for her willingness to share her story with us. Check out her Kindle book, Murder on the 56th Day, available on Amazon.com. Linda donates all her proceeds from the book to charity. She requests you order the Kindle version and not the printed copy, as she no longer has copies available. I also recommend Kevin Damask's book titled Cold, The Unsolved Murders of 7 Young Women. See the links to both books in the show notes. A very special thanks goes out this season to Mari Zorb Hansen, a fourth-generation UW alum, for all the amazing research, fact-checking, and just stellar assistance with this season. Mari's dedication and hard work on this story is in the memory of her late father, David Zorb, who was finishing his senior year at UW when Christine was murdered. Thank you, Mari. Contact me by email at dakotaspotlight@gmail.com. Don't miss the amazing Dakota Spotlight Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Dakota Spotlight. This story took place over 50 years ago, and memories undoubtedly have shifted and evolved with time. Individuals impacted by this crime and others who have looked into this case may have different accounts of events in this story. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.